Imagine you're standing in the middle of the ocean. No land in sight, no boat, no rescue, just waves. Constant, crashing, unforgiving. That's what it feels like when life pulls you under, when you're emotionally drowning. And here's the truth we don't talk about enough. Every single one of us will be in that water at some point. We don't like to admit it, but we've all felt like we were gasping for air in a life that felt too heavy to hold. Sometimes it's the quiet, subtle kind of drowning, the daily grind that chips away at your identity until you wake up one day and don't recognize who you are. Other times, it's more violent. A breakup, a job loss, a diagnosis, the death of someone you love. A moment that rips away everything you thought was stable. And in that moment, you're not thinking about ambition or goals. You're thinking, how do I stay afloat? And this is where we need to shift our understanding. Because culturally, we're conditioned to believe that the only acceptable state is to be thriving. Winning, crushing it. Hustling but drowning, that's weakness. That's failure. That's the stuff we hide behind Instagram filters and fake smiles. So we suffer in silence. We drown quietly, pretending we're fine. But let's be honest, no. One gets out of life without swallowing water. The question isn't if you'll have moments of struggle. The question is, what will you do when those moments come? Psychologically, what's fascinating is that in moments of overwhelm, our brain's natural response is to isolate. To protect us from shame, we retreat. The amygdala kicks in, triggering fight, flight, or freeze. And for many of us, that freeze becomes the default. We stop reaching out, stop expressing, stop hoping. But here's what neuroscience also shows. The presence of just one supportive connection, one voice, one outstretched hand, can completely change how we process adversity. It doesn't even have to be a big gesture. In fact, the brain responds more to consistent micro supports than grand, infrequent interventions. That's why the metaphor of the straw is so powerful. It's not about rescue, it's about survival. Philosophically, there's also a deeper layer here. Think about the story of Sisyphus, forever pushing a boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down. Absurd, right? But that's the human condition in many ways. We're constantly pushing, striving, trying to make sense of a life that often feels chaotic and unfair. And yet, what made Sisyphus heroic wasn't that he succeeded. It was that he kept showing up, he kept pushing. And we do the same, not because it always gets easier, but because there's meaning in resistance. There's growth in the struggle. When you feel like you're drowning, what you're actually experiencing is the breakdown of the illusion of control. You're face to face with your limitations, and in that place there's an opportunity not for instant transformation, but for radical self-awareness. Because when everything is stripped away, what's left is you. Not your achievements, not your image, not your timeline. Just you, and that's when real change begins. Not when life is smooth, but when it's shaking you awake. You don't have to be fearless. You don't have to be strong every moment. You just have to stay conscious. Keep your eyes open, and most importantly, remember, the drowning doesn't define you. It's what you do in the middle of it that matters. Do you give up? Do you pretend? Or do you look around? Just for a moment, and allow yourself to reach for something, anything, that keeps you afloat. That something might be a text from a friend, a memory of your child's laughter, a passage in a book, a whisper of purpose that says, not yet, don't quit yet, that's the straw, and sometimes that's all it takes. Here's the part we miss. Survival is noble. You don't need to be exceptional to matter. Sometimes being here, still breathing, still showing up, is the most powerful thing you can do. And that is enough. That is not weak. That is not lesser. That is human. So when you feel like you're going under, whether it's for the first time or the 100th pause, acknowledge it. Don't run from it, because in that honest moment, in the admission of I'm not okay, You create space. And in that space, even the smallest support can change your trajectory. Because no matter how deep the water feels, even a straw can keep you breathing if you let it. Let's talk about something we tend to overlook when we're in pain or watching someone else struggle: the power of small support. We live in a world that glamorizes big fixes. You know, the ones: massive breakthroughs, overnight transformations, some magical mentor or billion-dollar solution. But when you're drowning, you're not waiting for a miracle. You're looking for something, anything, to hold on to. And the truth is, it's usually not the lifeboat that saves you. It's the straw. The smallest, most seemingly insignificant thing that helps you just long enough to keep your head above water. And yet, we don't give the straw enough credit. We underestimate the value of a kind word, a look of understanding, a tiny act of presence. We convince ourselves that if we can't offer someone a solution wrapped in fireworks, it's better to stay quiet. But that's not how the human mind works. When someone is overwhelmed, what they need is not a lecture, not a plan, not a motivational quote slapped over a sunset. What they need is to feel seen, to feel like they're not invisible, that they matter even in their lowest moment. There's real science behind this. Studies in behavioral psychology show that when people feel emotionally supported, even minimally, they're more resilient in the face of adversity. And I'm not talking about hours of therapy or grand interventions. I'm talking about micro moments. A friend replying with "I'm here" when you say you're struggling. A stranger holding the door when your hands are full. A co-worker noticing you seem off and asking, "Are you okay?" These little things register with our nervous system in big ways. They calm the stress response. They signal safety. And in times of emotional drowning, safety is everything. But here's where it gets interesting: most people don't realize they are capable of being that kind of support. We think being helpful means we need to be experts, saviors, or perfectly put together ourselves, but we don't. You don't need credentials to care. You don't need a plan to be present. You just need to show up, with empathy, with patience, with humility, and sometimes not even with words, just with your attention. Philosophically, this is about shifting from the idea that helping means fixing, to understanding that helping often just means witnessing. In ancient Stoic thought, the idea of shared human struggle was central sympatheia, the belief that we are all connected, all part of the same living whole. When one person suffers, we all do. So when you offer support, even something as small as acknowledgement, you're not just helping another person survive, you're reinforcing your own humanity in the process. And here's what happens when you start to understand the power of small support. Your excuses disappear. You can no longer say, "I'm not qualified," or "it's not my place," or "it won't make a difference." Because now you know it does. You know that sometimes the tiniest act has the biggest ripple effect. Think about it. How many people have carried a kind word with them for years? Something someone said in passing, probably forgetting it the moment it left their mouth, but it stayed with the person who heard it. It became a mental lifeline, a reason to hold on. That's real power, and it doesn't cost a thing. But it's not just about others. This matters when you're the one drowning too, because when you're stuck in the deep end, you're not going to be pulled out by some massive rescue operation. You're going to be saved, piece by piece, breath by breath, one tiny choice, one supportive gesture, one small shift in how you talk to yourself. And that means we have to reframe how we think about progress. We have to stop waiting for a big win to feel better and start noticing the straws. The little things that remind us we're still alive, still capable, still worth saving. Because those straws aren't trivial, they're foundational. You want to help someone, be consistent, be kind. Don't underestimate your impact. Don't wait to be perfect before you show up for someone else. And definitely don't think that your pain disqualifies you from being helpful. In fact, Your pain makes you more powerful. It gives you insight, compassion, credibility. You don't have to change someone's world to keep them in it. That's what I want you to remember. That when you reach out, when you care even a little, when you choose connection over silence, you might be the only reason someone makes it to tomorrow. And in that moment, you're not just a straw. You're a lifeline. You're proof that humanity still exists, that someone still cares, and that sometimes is everything. Let's flip the lens for a second. We've talked about what it feels like to be the one drowning. But now I want to ask you a harder question. What if you are the straw? What if, in the middle of someone else's storm, you are the one small, fragile thing that keeps them afloat? And before you push back with, "I'm not strong enough," or "I don't have it together," stop. That's not what this is about. This is not about saving someone. It's not about being their answer, their solution, their rock. It's about being present. Being there, being the one steady breath of air when the water is all around. We get so caught up in this cultural obsession with being significant. We think that to make a difference, we have to be exceptional, loud, powerful, influential. But the truth is, some of the most life-changing moments come from people who never planned to be important. They just showed up. They were kind when someone expected judgment. They listened when someone needed silence. They stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. Psychologically, what's fascinating is that the brain doesn't always distinguish between big and small acts of support. It registers consistency. Emotional safety comes not from someone saying the perfect thing once, but from someone who keeps showing up in imperfect ways. That means you don't need a script, you don't need training, you just need to be willing. The problem is, we don't often realize the impact we're having. You might be showing up for a friend, checking in, holding space for them, and not think twice about it. But for them, it might be the only reason they're still trying. You might be the only person in their world who isn't asking them to fix it, to hurry up, or to pretend they're okay. You're just there, and that is what being the straw looks like: quiet, simple, incredibly powerful, and yes, sometimes it's hard. It's uncomfortable, it feels like you're not doing enough, but that's the myth we've been sold, that impact has to be measurable, that support has to be visible. Real support, the kind that reaches into someone's darkest moment, doesn't usually look dramatic. It looks like a text message. It looks like sitting on a couch in silence. It looks like asking, "Want me to come over?" and meaning it. Philosophically, this calls us to embrace something deeper, the idea of shared responsibility. That we are, whether we admit it or not, bound to each other. There's a reason communities exist. There's a reason ancient cultures thrived on interconnectedness. Because survival was never meant to be a solo act, and in a modern world where isolation is easy and connection is optional, choosing to support someone becomes a radical act. It becomes a moral stance, a decision to say, "I won't let you do this alone. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but I'm still figuring out my own stuff. And I get that. We all are, but here's the beautiful paradox. Supporting someone else doesn't require you to be finished with your healing. In fact, sometimes, being in your own process gives you the empathy to support someone more authentically. You don't need to have the answers. You just need to be willing to sit in the questions with them. That willingness to care, to connect, to witness someone's pain without turning away, is what builds resilience in both of you. You grow in your own strength by holding space for someone else's weakness, and they, in turn, find the courage to keep going because of your presence. There's a line I keep coming back to: you might be the only Bible someone ever reads. It means your actions, your kindness, your willingness to show up. Those might be the only examples of love, compassion, and grace that someone ever sees. And they'll remember that, maybe not with words, but with a feeling, a knowing, a moment that says, "I mattered." Someone cared. That's what we're talking about here, not fixing people, not playing hero, but simply being the quiet reminder that they're not alone. And don't you dare underestimate that. Don't talk yourself out of it because you think you're not ready, not enough, or not worthy. You are the straw. You're already doing it, just by listening, caring, and refusing to walk away. So the next time someone around you is struggling, don't overthink it. Show up, say something, sit beside them. Let them know they're not invisible. You don't have to solve the storm. You just have to remind them they're not facing it alone. Let me tell you something that most people don't hear enough. You're more capable than you think, and you have more value than you realize, even if you're still figuring your own life out. There's this common belief that in order to help others, in order to matter, in order to make an impact, we first have to arrive. We have to be healed. We have to have the answers, but that's a lie. You don't need to be extraordinary to be effective. You don't need to be flawless to be powerful. You just need to stop underestimating yourself. We all carry this inner critic, that voice that says, "Who are you to help?" You haven't figured it out yet. You're still struggling. But here's the paradox, and I want you to sit with this for a second. It's often the people who have walked through the fire and come out bruised, not unscarred but alive, that make the most meaningful impact on others, not because they're perfect, but because they understand, because they've felt it, and because their survival gives their words weight. Psychologically, this is about self-efficacy, the belief that your actions can make a difference. When you underestimate yourself, you deactivate that belief. You convince your mind that you're powerless, even when evidence suggests otherwise. And here's what's dangerous about that. When you believe you're not enough, you pull back, you don't speak up. You don't offer the insight you've gained. You sit on wisdom, on experience, on perspective that could change someone else's life, just because it doesn't feel polished. But let's be honest, life isn't polished. People aren't inspired by perfect, they're inspired by real. Think about the moments that have moved you the most. Was it a motivational reel with flashing lights and flawless success stories? Or was it someone looking you in the eye and saying, "Yeah, I've been there too, and I'm still standing"? Your scars are not a disqualification. They're your credentials. When we talk about being the straw for someone else, being the small but critical support, they're not looking for a savior. They're looking for someone human, someone who gets it, and that someone might be you. You don't need to fix their problems. You just need to remind them that it's possible to get through. And if you've gotten through even one thing, even one heartbreak, one failure, one dark season, then you're carrying something worth sharing. Now, philosophically, this goes even deeper. It challenges the whole narrative we've built around worth. We think worth comes from achievement, from resumes, followers, money, titles, but that's ego's definition. True worth is existential. It's the value you have simply by existing, the fact that you're here. Aware, evolving, imperfect, but willing means you have something to offer. You don't need to earn your worth. You need to remember it. And once you do, your relationship to yourself changes. You start to show up differently, not with arrogance, but with presence, with authenticity. You stop pretending. You stop hiding, and in doing that, you give others permission to do the same. This is why people underestimate themselves. Not because they lack ability, but because they lack belief. And belief isn't something that just happens. It's something you build. Every time you speak when you're scared, every time you help when you feel unqualified, every time you show up when it's easier to stay quiet, you're building that belief. You want to know how people become confident? They act before they feel ready. They start small, they fail, they survive, they keep showing up. And eventually, they look back and realize, wait, I didn't just survive, I grew. That's the process. That's how you stop underestimating yourself, not by waiting to feel ready, but by proving to yourself that you already are. And here's the kicker. When you start owning your value, you give others a way out of their own self-doubt. You model what it looks like to lead from the middle, not the mountaintop. That's leadership, that's influence, that's being the straw. You don't need to be extraordinary to matter. You need to be available, present, honest. You need to recognize that everything you've been through has given you a lens that someone else needs. And maybe, just maybe, you're exactly who they've been waiting for. So stop playing small, stop shrinking your voice. Stop withholding your story because you think it's not big enough. It is, you are, because the person who's drowning doesn't care how polished you are. They care that you see them, that you understand, and that you're still standing proof that they can stand too.